All right, welcome to Unlocked Investor. I'm your host, Ian Robertson, and today I'm joined by Mustafa Ladha. Mustafa left his 9 to 5 job at the age of 29 after building his financial foundation throughout his 20s. He is known for his ability to create new income streams by finding passive real estate investment opportunities and has helped over 200 people navigate their finances and become financially free. Mustafa, welcome.
Hey Ian, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to have you here. Let's dive right in. You left your job at 29. Then what? What happened? Briefly walk us through your journey from then until now.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a great question. I think these days there's a lot of like, hey, you have to find your passion. Hey, you have to quit your job. You have to just, do what you love, etc. But I don't know, that didn't necessarily resonate with me because there wasn't one thing that I loved per se as a job, right? Like I studied genetics, I went to med school, decided that wasn't the right fit for me, but ultimately I wanted to figure out what's the most scalable way to help people and what does that look like. So after that, I transitioned to the pharmaceutical industry. I was working, a regular 9 to 5 job in pharmacovigilance, basically drug development. And I was structuring different companies and I was figuring out different ways to add value for people. And that's really what I was doing in my 20s, just building different businesses and seeing what scaled the most and what I enjoyed, etc. So then I got to the point where I had like no free time, which was fine because I was doing what I love to do, which was work and help people and create value. But it got to a point where I was really starting to understand what people mean by opportunity cost, in the sense that if you have no time, how are you going to allocate time to, let's say, three different ventures? You have your traditional W-2 job, 9 to 5. You have maybe two different businesses. All three strategies are making you six figures. So in theory, you're good, but it's not really about the money. It's also about like the end goal. How are you going to help people? At least that was the goal for me. And how are you going to do it at scale? And so eventually I exited one business, I quit my job, and I just focused on real estate because that was the most scalable for me.
Got it. And so in your 20s, you had your regular W-2 job, but you also had these other businesses. Tell me more about that. So I assume you have the real estate component to it. Is there something else that you had as well? Do you still have that, or where's that?
Yeah. So for example, I think, in your 20s, at least in the circles that I was around, people are always trying to figure out how to make money. And everything looks amazing online, in my opinion. It looks like everyone's killing it online, and that's, good. But that doesn't mean that I will kill it in every strategy online or that people talk about online. So one of the things that I was doing, for example, is I was running an e-commerce company, selling stuff on Amazon. Um, and I was making, bottom line profit, six figures, and it was good, but it was like a lot of manual work. So for me, it wasn't necessarily the most scalable business. So that was one thing that I decided probably in around 2023 that I was just gonna, exit, and it wasn't a good fit for me because I wanted to, find a business that I felt like was infinitely scalable and really stress test that against other strategies to reinforce that it is more scalable. So for me, that strategy has always been real estate that has, consistently proven to be more scalable. And it's the same reason why eventually I left my W-2 job, my 9 to 5 job, just fundamentally saying, hey, I'm allocating too much time to this. And that opportunity cost of spending time here is negatively impacting my ability to grow my business. So I quit my job, I 2x my business the next year, right? And I continued to do that even the following year. So for me, and it's all about figuring out ways to have like an S curve of like aggressive growth. And part of that is positioning yourself so that you're always making a couple, uncomfortable decisions or decisions that you're like, hey, I don't really think this is the right move. But in that discomfort, you can learn more and you can grow more. And then you can figure out what the most efficient way is to continue to try to exponentially grow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so now walk me through then your real estate business specifically. So once you said, okay, I'm, breaking free of the other chains that maybe are in my life that are taking up some of my time. Now I can focus all my energy on this one business, that being real estate. Um, Tell me, I guess, where that started and how that's expanded since.
Yeah, sure. So I got involved in real estate probably around 2017 or so. Been investing ever since. And for me, fundamentally, it's been just trying to understand what people are looking for and what opportunities I have access to and how to make the best match for everyone. For example, real estate is typically viewed as a very illiquid asset class. So if you can structure short-term strategies where people can make money and you can try to equate it to like a dividend stock, or in a dividend stock, you're making money every quarter, but you have a real estate like promissory note structure where investors are making money every month, then you have a more liquid vehicle, and it's easier to structure for that first-time investor who maybe doesn't want it to buy into like a value add strategy that's like a 5-year exit plan where they make most of their money at the end of 5 years. So to me, it's really just about understanding the person I'm talking to, understanding what resonates with them, what their goals are, and then building out an investment strategy to align with those goals.
Got it. And yeah, I mean, we've been working together now a few years now, and I've seen that that you're not just focusing on one particular investment opportunity at a time and just funneling as many people into it. You have several different avenues that you're taking people down based on what they're actually looking for. Because it's true, some people are looking for recurring cash now. Other people are just looking to put the money that they have extra above and beyond what they're earning and throw it into something for more long-term wealth creation. And so you're saying that you have sort of both sides of it based on what somebody in particular is looking for, right?
Exactly. And I think what I would say is respectfully, I think a lot of people don't know what they're looking for. In the sense that if you asked anyone, do you want to make money? The normal answer would be yes. If you ask somebody, how do you want to make money? I think people would be a little confused or scratch their head a little bit. Then you have to break it down. You can say, okay, hey, you can invest through your retirement account. You can set up a self-directed IRA. You can reach out to Ian, and you can make money. But it doesn't, to some degree, it doesn't matter how much money you make. That money is illiquid until 65. You can't access it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're starting out and if you want to invest in something and you're scared or it's risk averse or it feels uncomfortable, from my perspective, it's better to use that money that's illiquid. And I would say the same for, your angel investment, where your timeline is maybe 10 years. Use your self-directed IRA. Same with these real estate strategies. Certain ones are going to be better for a self-directed IRA. In other situations, you want to use cash. So it's really, from my perspective, Ian, when I'm talking to somebody, it's really to understand what their goals are and then to ask them, does this path make sense? To really show them like the whole forest of real estate investing and draw a path through that forest to say, hey, this is one way we could structure it. Does that make sense? Does it align with your goals? Does it resonate? And then if it does, that's how we would structure it. If not, then we'd pivot and we'd say, okay, what are the problems with this plan? And let's make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask one more question before sort of pivoting more so towards, your role as a leader, both in the industry and just within your own company. But a lot of people that are just trying to start out, one is maybe they don't know whether they're accredited or not, and we're not going to talk about the legalese of that. That's not our space, but just sort of understanding: is there a way in your mind, truthfully, is there a way for people to get into passive real estate investing regardless of their net worth? Like if somebody has maybe $100 extra a month or $1,000 extra a month, or the possibility to expand their income a little bit to have more of a gap, like can anybody find a way into this type of real estate? Or some people think you have to have like boots on the ground. I have to do something myself physically before I can get into passive real estate.
I think you asked a great question, and there's a couple different ways to break it down. Very simply, when you talk to somebody like me, typically the answer is no. Typically, you can't invest in real estate unless you're accredited. And for the guys listening to this, go on Google, type accredited investor, Investopedia, and you'll get the definition. But if you want the shortcut, basically somebody with money versus somebody without money. And the idea is you can only get rich if you have money. And to me, that's a very flawed mentality because I'm very pro growth. I'm very pro investing in yourself. I'm very pro like getting educated and continue to be educated and continue to learn more. So that's really how I built my business, Ian, within Velocia Capital, within Realty Mercado, within all the different business I'm a part of. It's really to say, hey, how do you help somebody get access to investments that either doesn't have money, doesn't have a lot of money, doesn't have exposure? How do you kind of have have access to these investments while saying, hey, we're here if you need us, we're here if you want us, this is what we do, and really an education play. So we have, Reg D 506 Bs, which are open to non-accredited investors, but it's not something that you can actively solicit. So I can't actively go out and market, hey, my performance was this, hey, this is what we do, etc. Right? But you and I, many of our investors that we sent to Madison Trust are not accredited, right? And I've sent, well over 40 people over the years to Madison Trust, and I have an account with them myself. But what I would say is that's one strategy. Then you have another strategy that's called Reg A Tier 2. Reg A is really built for non-accredited investors. Most real estate funds don't have this option. We do. The cool thing is, it's a 5K minimum, so you still need money, which we'll talk about. But even more important, you have monthly statements from a fund administrator. So you have an added layer of security, and you also have audited financials. So every month you're getting a statement saying, hey, this is how much you made. Last month, investors made 1.5%. In 2023, investors made over 20%, right? It's structured as an 80-20 profit split with a 2% management fee. What that means in plain English is you'd take that 20% number, you'd divide by 0.8, and you'd add 2, and that's what the fund made, probably around 27%. So very simply, I think in the world of investing, you either have money or you don't. But in life, you either have time or you have money. Sometimes you have both. It's a rare situation. I think when you're starting out your career, you don't have money, but you have a lot of time. So it's very important to listen to a podcast by Ian. It's very important to learn about what different financial instruments exist in the market. And it's very important to learn about yourself, most importantly, because you could have a financial instrument that makes you the most money. But if it doesn't align with your risk tolerance, it's not the right fit. Or if it doesn't align with how you want to make money, it's not the right fit. So fundamentally, I think for those people who don't have money, it's just about investing time in figuring out how to make money. And then over time, you will make money. And then you will have learned how you want to invest, how you want to scale, and you'll have a roadmap. But fundamentally, when it comes to passive investing, you do need capital, but passive investing might not be the right play right now. It might be more important to spend that $5,000 on a course or spend that $5,000 buying books and testing out different businesses and trying to scale.
And do you think that for most people, the path to unlocking having the ability and the income, the cash flow available to make these types of passive investments, do you think the secret there, or not so secret, is owning a business and having some sort of business in your income stream?
I don't think so. I think it really just depends on what aligns with the individual. I think these days there's the undercurrent of, hey, don't go to college. Hey, college is useless. Hey, create a business, this entrepreneurship culture or solopreneurship culture, which I'm big on, right? But it's to say fundamentally, what is the opportunity cost of your decision? There's situations where I'm talking to somebody who is a doctor. Maybe he's making 200K, 500K, 1.5 million, whatever his numbers are. If he's going to quit his job, and it could be a doctor, it could be an engineer, it could be a lawyer, it could be somebody in IT. If they're making 200K plus and they're going to quit their job to focus on something else, that means they need to make 200K plus for it to be like a net zero trade. For most people starting a business, I don't think it's viable to assume that you're going to make 6 figures your first year. I think really, any business you start, you really have to put your blood, sweat, and tears into it. And it's like having a child. It's a lot of work. And it's definitely worth it. You can scale a lot and things of that nature. But if you look at how I built my business, it was really about mitigating risk at every level to say fundamentally, I have different ideas that are scalable. Let's scale them, but let's not quit the W-2 job just yet. Let's try to do everything at the same time until you can actually look at it and qualitatively or quantitatively say, hey, this 6-figure income is not worth my time. It's costing me more because I could be growing my business more. And I think that's really how I would approach it, Ian. It's not like an either or situation. Usually it's an and situation. And then at some point you have to ask yourself, hey, what's holding me back? A lot of times for individuals that I come across, being comfortable is what holds us back, right? We could be making 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, and we're like, okay, hey, I'm comfortable. I'm not going to continue to aggressively push and scale. Meanwhile, you'll see other people who are always pushing the envelope, trying new things and trying to scale aggressively. So it just, I guess, to some degree, and it just kind of boils down to the person. And it's also a matter of saying that, whatever individual decision an individual makes, that's perfectly valid. That's the right decision for them. But, typically in our circles, in the people that we come across, they're very growth oriented, they're very entrepreneurship oriented. But from my experience with passive investors, they come from all walks of life.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And now, based on how you've been talking so far, I think I know the answer to come. I'm going to ask it maybe more specifically is work-life balance. So I know for everybody, it's going to be based on whatever makes sense for them. Some people love their work, and so that is their life. and for other people, it's not so much. They want to have more life and less work. Where do you fall in line on work-life balance? Just I guess in general, but more so for yourself personally.
That's a great question. So we're in 2025 and my answer has changed over the years. So like Mustafa 2023, I would be like, I don't believe in work-life balance, which is probably the answer you expect because my work is my life and I'm very happy with that dynamic. But then, part of me really, like I mentioned, tries to aggressively invest time in things that make me uncomfortable. And part of that is like, hey, how can you budget out time to actually work on work-life balance? Not because it's something I believe in, but it's because it's like worth exploring to understand better. So in 2024, I took a month off and I went on a spiritual trip. Like if it's called like going for Hajj, it's like a pilgrimage. Basically, let's say for a month I didn't work. In 2024, I doubled my business versus 2023. And I worked, let's say, cumulatively maybe 2 months less than I did in 2023. So when I look at quantitatively, and we'll be even more, conservative, and we'll say I worked 1 month less. So in 11 months, I did twice as much than 2023's 12-month performance. So for me, that's interesting because it's one of those things that like, you can't have it all. You just have to really be intentional about that. I'm not necessarily intentional about work-life balance because I want to aggressively scale my business. So then I have to ask myself, in what situations do work-life balance matter to me? Do I want to spend time with my kids? Yeah. It's quality over quantity. So what is that balance? What is the right fit for me? And I think fundamentally for a lot of people, that answer, like you alluded to in the question, that answer is going to be different. So for me, it's also to say, hey, if I can build all of my businesses so they don't need me, then I can focus on other things that make me happy. And I can just keep stacking them where I can do those things that make me happy without necessarily leveraging too much of my time. And I think, Ian, for me, that's like a constant growth where it's like, hey, I want to be there for my kids. I want to be there for my family, but I also want to aggressively grow my business. And I might talk to, this coach or this individual, and they might have, one set recommendation or expectation or course of action that they say I should follow. But ultimately, if for me, it's like we as individuals limit ourselves. So you can have it all. You just have to figure out, how can I have it all? What does that look like? And say, hey, I'm going to work 1% this year on this one task. I work a lot. I do well. Maybe I don't spend enough time at home. So I'm going to start allocating, the mornings. I'm going to the office later so I can drop off my kids to school, excuse me. And then I'll go to work. Or like in my case, when I quit my job, my W-2 job, I said, okay, on Fridays, I'm not going to work. I'm just going to focus on reading and learning and growing. Now, when you do something like dramatic like that, don't tell anybody, because if you tell people, they're going to mess with your schedule. So I didn't know that. So I told somebody, and now like my Fridays are eternally messed up to some degree, where I block out time for deep work, etc. But it's not necessarily the whole day or in the structure that I would want. So I think to some degree, Ian, it comes to like the individual and deciding like how you're gonna hack the system for yourself and how you're gonna make time for everything, assuming everything is equally important.
Sure, that makes sense. And now I think a lot of what you're referring to is also like you're working on your business and not in your business as much as you can, and continue to get out of the business so you can look into it and add scalability to it and add, an increase to it as much as you can without being relied upon for the everyday operations. But now, looking to say your investors or any clients that you may have and that you're serving, how do you best serve them or take care of them? One, when you're when you're as busy as you are, but also if you're trying to step out of the business more to be able to look in, how do you best take care of your clients and investors?
I think it's a great question, Ian. And it's something that I'm not going to sit here and say I'm an expert in. I think for me, in all the things that I do, I'm just looking to continually improve, right? So with respect to like clients working on your business versus in your business, I think I typically spend a lot of time, especially over the last year or so, working on systems and structure and working on my business. But then when I notice like, hey, somebody's emailed me something, then I switch gears. Or I notice, hey, something needs to get done and I need to do it, then I switch gears. So for me, it's usually like a seesaw. Like you're trying to balance it perfectly, but at different points, different things are going to get prioritized. And then ultimately you're just like everything, you're just doing the best you can. Now, in my industry, I think I would argue that a lot of like my interactions with the people I work with my clients, they work with me. So for me, it's very hard necessarily. It doesn't necessarily make sense or doesn't, it's not logical for me to just transition to having somebody else, be that person that they interact with. And that's something that just because it's uncomfortable for me doesn't necessarily mean it's the wrong thing to do. So I think it's about, building that transition and building that bridge to get from point A to point B while saying, hey, fundamentally, let's say we have a webinar or something, I will be there. Fundamentally, when people text me, I respond usually within like an hour, at worst within a business day. And I think, I work with over 249 clients at this point. I think on any given day, all of them would say, yeah, Mustafa responds within a business day. Right now, we're doing this podcast. I had an investor call me in the middle, right? So it's one of those things that you're always juggling different priorities. But it's to say that, when I'm on the phone with an investor, a client of mine, or when I'm on a podcast or whatever I'm doing currently, the person that I'm with, they know that I'm 100% focused on that one thing. And then ultimately, I'll take it to 100%. I'll take it to fruition. I'll loop in the right people to kind of work the process and to move it along and to get that desired outcome. But, it's one of those things that it's all part of scaling and growing. Just like an investor, when they choose to trust me with their capital, that's a huge, risk that they're taking from my perspective. So I'm communicating that and I'm saying, I appreciate your trust in me, and this is what we intend on delivering. And just like with that investor, you'd keep them updated with the performance of their capital. It's the same to say, hey, fundamentally, they've not only just invested in like a company, they've also, or like a real estate project, they've also decided to like we're partnering with each other on that journey, on that growth. And that's why, like, I measure it by like financial freedom and by like building people's net worth and how much money people are making versus doors or any other metric. Because to me, that's the most important thing. It's like fundamentally, how does real estate change your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And now, as you're scaling and you're growing and you're working with more people, inevitably, your role as a leader is going to become more and more pivotal in that success. Also, as you're transitioning really through that as well, what would you attribute most to success as a leader just over the years and improving in that space naturally?
I think it's a good question, Ian. So there's many different aspects of being a leader. And part of that, I guess, where I would start is maybe delegating. I think for a lot of people who are maybe make that transition from a 9 to 5 W-2 type job to an entrepreneur to, building a team, all of these different things, it's about understanding the people around you are not you. So when I'm talking to Ian, his skill set might be different than me. That's good. We need to kind of help Ian like lean into his strengths and not like ignore his weaknesses, but make his weaknesses such that they're not noticeable. And so that's really what I worked on a lot, let's say when I was in my pharmaceutical job. right? Really worked on aggressively on my weaknesses using that job. But you're never going to make money, or you're never going to make serious money, in my humble opinion, by trying to monetize off your weaknesses. You're always going to make money monetizing off of your strengths, but you want to minimize the negative impact of your weaknesses, if that makes sense, Ian. And then when you're talking to, coworkers, employees, people around you, partners, etc., it's just about giving them the tools to succeed as you see them, and really saying, hey, fundamentally, I'm here. I may be at the finish line. How do I draw a map for somebody else to get to the finish line with me? And if they can replace me at the finish line here, then I can go and work on something else. So I think to some degree, when I look at, molding people, helping people grow, etc., it's really with the intention of, hey, this is what I'm doing. How can I get this person to master this task? Or, hey, this is what I want to learn, but I don't have time. How would I learn this task if I had time? Let me now put somebody else on it to really learn this task, to really scale aggressively, while recognizing I'm not the expert. So I'm telling them, hey, I'm not the expert. This is what I hope that you will achieve. And I'll link you with the right resources, and I'll draw that roadmap, and I'll give you all the tools to succeed. And we'll sit down together and determine what success looks like. But I can't sit here and say I'm an expert in that topic. Does that make sense, Ian? Just kind of breaking down things that I am good at and things that I am not, but don't have the time to become good at.
Right. And so recognizing that is half the battle, but then trusting somebody else to take on something that you recognize as a weakness. How do you do that? You're all about mitigating risk. How do you do that without taking on a risk of trusting somebody inappropriately, like maybe like they're not to be trusted? Like how do you trust somebody quickly, maybe, with something that you recognize as your own weakness?
I think to some degree you can't. At least I can't. It's very difficult, right? So like you could hire somebody who's, let's say, has the best LinkedIn profile, or has the best podcast, or has the best Instagram, Twitter, or whatever. Let's say they have social media, like proof of concept, right? So you could say, oh, hey, this guy's an expert in whatever they do. Let me hire them, bring them onto the team, and hopefully it'll help the team grow. So that's one avenue, like hiring somebody that's good in theory, or has a good resume, I guess is the traditional way you'd look at it. Somebody who has a good resume on paper. Or you could hire somebody with no skills, right? Most people, if they have the budget, would hire somebody with skills in the resume. For me, it's not easy, but what I look for is like, does that person have hunger, drive, determination to succeed? Because I'm hiring that person for like a 10-year timeline. So they don't have to be amazing today. They just have to be amazing eventually. And along the way, I'm just looking for like a lot of effort. I'm looking for people to work very hard and to really figure it out and to be like self-motivated. Because I think to some degree that's something you can't train or teach. And I think that underpins a lot of my ability to do what I've done, is just to continuously push myself. So circling back to your question, right? It would be to really optimize for that. And then, the other pieces, if the person has experience and stuff, obviously that helps. But it's really to say, I'm looking for that person who has desire and hunger, and I'm looking to give them tasks. And ideally, I'm looking to allocate time to give them feedback to say, hey, this is how you did the task. Good, bad, ugly, whatever it is. But also these days, like we have so many tools, right? So I can just sit on the laptop, I can record my screen, and I can do my work, and I can just talk through my work, and I can send that to the person that I've hired, and I've said, hey, here's an example of something. Create a training on this based on what I've just done, and then like train yourself as well through that process. So I think, Ian, to some degree, with people that when you're building a team, when you're starting from scratch, it's to say, hey, what do I need to outsource? What do I want to outsource? What do I not want to outsource? And to really say, where do you want to start? And for me, at least, I have a very MVP model. Historically, I'm like very reluctant to just drop money on things. And this is a weakness of mine that I think now I've broken. But for me, it would be to say I've had more success hiring people at, more nominal numbers and trying to help them grow than I have hiring the person with the right CV, the right resume, the right, let's say, social media background, because I haven't necessarily noticed a direct, correlation between the two. Sometimes the person who has the MBA is not more educated than the person who doesn't even have a college degree. It kind of stems, to me at least, it stems down to like the desire and the hunger to learn and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, because you mentioned the MVP model, are you more of a like fail fast kind of mentality where you try something new and if it's not working, you abruptly shut it down, or do you just go for it long term and expect that eventually it'll work itself out?
I think it depends. So, and it's a very good question, right? Like, the fail fast model is very simply, hey, you try different things. If it doesn't work out, that's okay. You move on to the next thing. For me, I don't try things unless I have a high degree of confidence that it will succeed. And if it doesn't succeed, that doesn't mean that the strategy was wrong. It could just be the execution was not up to par, right? Like, there's different times where I've said, okay, I'm going to hire this consulting company to do this work for me. And the consulting company doesn't do a good job. No problem. I kind of allocated that they wouldn't do a good job. I kind of mentally prepared and planned for that because I'm also like I plan for the worst and I like game theory it out so that if that happens, I'm prepared and I know how I'm going to pivot. And if it doesn't happen, obviously I'm happy and things happen the way I had hoped for them. But it's just like really prepare and understand what can go wrong. That way you're mitigating your risk as much as possible when you ultimately decide to go through with that strategy. Right. So then I got busy with, I was working on the systems. Systems were not scaling as much as I would have liked or whatever. Then I had to go focus on the business. So then I transitioned to focusing on the business, just like that seesaw that I was talking about. Then after a couple months, I circled back and I said, no, this strategy is gold. I know it's going to do well, etc. I know it's going to scale aggressively. I just need to find the right partner, the right, consulting company to get this done. So I did some more research. I now understood a little bit more about the market, about who to hire, how to hire them, because I had, previously failed and I learned from that experience. Then I went and I hired somebody else and they were doing much better. And then I'm like, yeah, no, I hired two people, excuse me. I hired two people to do two different tasks, but like interrelated. And I'm like, yeah, together they're doing much better, but I don't really know if I need them. So let me fire one and let me try to take that in-house. And let me see, now that I understand the process even more, let me see if it's even more scalable if I'm doing it myself or if my team is doing it ourselves. And that was the case. Ultimately, I let go of the other consulting firm as well to fundamentally say, hey, doing it in-house is much cheaper. Let's say 20-25% of the cost. I'm seeing similar results, but it's hard to weigh it as well, just because of the time factor and the work that I was doing is also compounds over time. But ultimately, I'm happy with the trajectory, and I recognize that there could be other ways to grow faster. But I think from an MVP perspective, from a cost of acquisition perspective, this is the right execution on this strategy. So now let's just double down. Let's just give it the 10 years that I originally wanted, to just say, hey, we're going to look at success in the long term, and we're just going to really focus on taking this big action and making it into as small steps as possible. And Ian, I hope that kind of answers your question on MVP versus, failing fast.
Yeah, it does. And you mentioned also that like recognizing maybe the MVP model is at this point in your business's stage, not like that's a weakness now, because you're at a point where you have maybe the resources, both from a team, like a human capital, but also maybe also just financially, you're at a point now where you can spend more on a certain outcome, desired outcome. Uh, Maybe other than you would with an MVP. So like you recognize that as now this is a weakness that's holding my company back. I need to pivot and change my mindset on it. Really, it sounds like to get to that next level. Is that a fair analysis?
Very, very fair. And the thing that I would say, Ian, is like, to some degree, it's very difficult to make that mindset shift because you have to first realize that you need to shift your mindset. And I come from a very rooted mentality of I don't know what I don't know. So I have to first learn what I don't know to then learn, is it worth learning? That's how I look at things. So if I'm like very frugal or very like careful with how I spend money, And if I know that when I work, I make X dollars a year, and if I was working, 2,080 hours, which is like the normal W-2 job, then I'd make this much an hour. I'd probably work much more than 2,000 hours a year. So then I have okay, it costs, I make this much an hour, pre-tax, let's say. Now, if I'm spending an hour deciding what decision I'm going to make, that's huge opportunity cost. So I can't spend so much time on certain decisions. I just need to go with the decision and move on. And it can be the right decision. It can be the wrong decision. I could have overspent by $1. I could have overspent by $5,000. But now I need to say, okay, hey, I overspent. Now I'm going to learn from that for next time, and let's move on. And I think to some degree, Ian, that's a hard mindset shift. If like your whole life you live a certain way. But it's also important to say, hey, what got me to this point isn't necessarily going to get me to where I want to be in the future, right? So it's to say, when you had time and no money, you can't allocate capital to things, or the risk is too high that it doesn't make sense, right? Because you just don't have the money. Once you have the money, then you can say, hey, I can allocate this, but what's the opportunity cost? Maybe I want, that flex car, that flex house, or whatever. Luckily for me, I'm very good at delaying gratification. So, I would just say, no, I would just allocate that to my business instead. So for me, and it's just to say, okay, now, like, if I view like the business's capital as my capital, and I'm, conservative with my capital, I'm going to be conservative with the business's capital. But I don't know what I don't know. I want to learn these other different strategies. So why don't I hire somebody who knows better than I do? Okay, I've hired this person. Are they fundamentally adding value? No, then I'm wasting money, so it's not a good fit. Or yes, they are adding value. Awesome, let's keep it going. And then a couple months later, yeah, they're still adding value, but it just feels expensive arbitrarily, right? So how can I get it cheaper if I build a team that can do that task ourselves? So it's really about iterating, Ian, to just say, hey, I'm of the mindset that there's always, people out there that are experts in something that I'm not an expert in. And usually they're selling a course, they're selling some product. So let me go buy that product. And, Mustafa in 2017 wouldn't have to be like, no, $100, what a waste of money. 5K, what a waste of money. X, whatever the amount is, it doesn't make sense right now. But now I'm at a point where it's like, oh, hey, you're selling a course. Okay, let's check it out. I don't really have the time to take the course, so I'll just give it to somebody else to take the course and really fundamentally see, is it going to improve value creation? Am I going to be in a position where I can add more value for my clients? And if so, then it's a win-win and it was worth it. And if not, it's okay. Somebody else spent the time to learn it, and hopefully I'll help them as they grow as an individual in the team. So that's kind of how I look at it, Ian, to say to your point and to what you mentioned. It's like a progression, right? Imagine you treated yourself like a early stage startup. 9 in 10 startups fail. Most people don't retire with enough money. So if those are the premises you start with, most people don't retire at 65 with 3 to 5 million, which is what I would view for the average American is enough. Like whatever resource you're using will probably have lower numbers. To me, the number is 3 to 5 million. People should be making 150K in retirement, in my opinion, passively. Ideally tax-free if they set up like a self-directed IRA with Ian. So if that's your number, how are you going to get there when you're making, let's say, 200K a year, which is good income, let's say, but you're a family of 4 or 5 living in New Jersey, California, New York, let's say high tax areas. It can be difficult. And that's where like investments come into play, or entrepreneurship, or really just figuring out ways to have your money work for you rather than having your money sit in the bank. But I think most people don't think about their money the way they think about their car or their house or their kids or their job, right? Like if you treat growing your money as a business, then you position your money to work for you, your whole life. And that's really how I approach these things.
Yeah, I mean, even the point of delayed gratification, like a lot of people, they're living in their life, like to the point to connect it to a business. Like you're living in your life, you're not thinking about maybe the long-term success path for your family or legacy building for your family, whereas you would if you spent just a little bit of time working on your life and not necessarily in it, just like with a business. So I think that's huge. And I really appreciate everything that you've added to this conversation. I want to respect your time, so we'll hop off here soon. But is there anything else that you would want to add? You want to share, like how people can connect with you and where people can find more about you?
Yeah, sure. So people can connect with me on LinkedIn. We'll probably also have like in the show notes, my contact information. Those would probably be the best ways to connect with me. Ultimately, in terms of adding value, I think for a lot of people, it comes down to like investing in yourself fundamentally. And whatever your goals are, really writing them down, asking yourself, hey, how am I going to accomplish this in 10 years? What steps do I need to take? And then if I wanted to accomplish this in 1 year, what would I need to do? So it's really to be a bit proactive with this, because that's how you really change your life so that you're in a position where you can actually retire. And forget retiring at 65, like you can retire at 40. It's just you have to be a bit more proactive and actually think through those steps to chart that course, and then to say, hey, this action feels, in alignment with what I can do today, to ultimately have that stack and have that compound, to have that end result of, financial freedom.
Love it. All right, perfect. Well, I really appreciate your time, Mustafa. Anybody like he said, I'm going to leave his information in the show notes. Anything else that he can do for you, certainly connect. He's a great resource. I can I can advocate for that over the years that we've known each other. But yeah, I really appreciate your time, Mustafa.
No, thank you, Ian, and thank you guys for listening. Have a nice night.